Good morning everyone, my name is Lim Yong Kai. Now, I would like to talk about my personal reflection on the role play. Now, let's start about the role play experience. As a part of investigation team, my role was to address the potential child labor issues in city confectionery supply chain and gather the necessary information to make recommendations to BUS health snacks. The main challenges was to ensure that I obtained accurate and detailed information from the executive, while understanding the cultural, regulatory, and operational challenges faced in their country. I chaired the meeting and asked about city confectionery child labor policy, supply chain, monitoring processes, and potential for the children to be involved in the production process. Throughout the meeting, I keep focused on the human rights, stressing the need for both companies to adhere to ethical standards and be responsible for the well-being of the workers. The CEO was concerned about the business continuity and the potential impact on the partnership. The CFO was concerned about the financial implication of any decision, and the CSO acknowledged the ethical dilemma but highlighted to the challenges of enforcement in some regions. I recommend the BUS Help Snacks continue the partnership and strongly urge city confectionery to immediately implement verifiable supply chain monitoring improvements to ensure there is no child labor involved. Our final recommendation to ensure the implementation of a zero-tolerance child labor policy supported by the third-party audits to uphold the ethical standards. This experience had deepened my understanding of the complexity of enforcing ethical labor practices in global supply chains, the importance of transparency, and the need to balance ethical consideration with the commercial realities. Ethical perspective that I use is grounded in deontological ethics, focusing on the inherent duty to respect human rights. This perspective emphasizes the adherence to moral principles such as fairness and justice, regardless of business or financial implication. By advocating for zero-tolerance child labor policy and third-party audits, I prioritize ethical standards and the well-being of the workers. For the impact on stakeholders, for city confectionery, we need to invest in more rigorous monitoring and supply chain improvement, likely to face increased operational costs but could benefit from stronger brand reputation and client trust. For BUS Health Snack, aligning with ethical practices reinforce their brand image as a social responsible company. However, they may face pressure from consumers and stakeholders to ensure accountability. Now, I would like to talk about the cultural background. In many Western cultures, child labor is seen as a clear violation of human rights, leading a strong stance against it. This view is often shaped by strict labor laws and norms that emphasize the protection of children. However, this cultural lens may not fully capture the complexity faced by other regions. In some areas, child labor is deeply intertwined with the local economy survival, where families rely on children's work to make ends meet. The rigid perspective of the child labor as universally wrong often overlooks these local realities, highlighting the need for a more nuanced understanding the balances of human rights with the practical challenges faced by the different communities. Next will be the insight to the cultural biases. For the first one, rigid ethical stance, I initially assumed all the stakeholders would share the same urgency about eliminating child labor. The second will be business versus ethical dilemma. I focuses heavily on ethical responsibility, but not fully considering the economic realities of developing countries where child labor can be a socio-economic necessity. The third one will be cultural sensitivity. In some regions, child labor is a complex socio-economic realities. Ethical standards can conflict with the local financial needs of the families. Next one will be the balancing ethical practices with the commercial realities. For the example, the recommendation to BUS Health Snack to continue the partnership while pushing for the supply chain monitoring and third-party audits struck a balance between ethical practices and commercial needs, while it linked to the situational leadership theories. This theory posits the leader must adjust their style based on the situation and the people involved. My recommendation align with this, offering practical solutions that meet ethical standards while accounting for business challenges. Now, I would like to talk about what I learned from the role play. The thing that I learned is complexity of the decision making. Ethical decisions are rarely black and white. I initially took a rigid stands on the child level, but learn that nuance is often required to balance human rights, culture, and business needs. The next will be influence on the future ethical decision making. Greater flexibility in applying ethical standards. In my first career-related role as a graduate, I will approach ethical dilemmas with more flexibility, while I will maintain a commitment to core ethical principles. I now know that I need to understand the context and to be open to alternative solutions that respect local culture and operation constraints. For example, in future supply chains investigation, I would aim to provide solutions that are both ethically sound and practically feasible for the stakeholder involved.